I mean, I talk about mixing in the room, in my head, as if I'm listening to an orchestra, because my first experience as a musician was in orchestra.
It is the classic way to arrange sounds. It's arranged by not only the players and parts, but the instruments themselves speak in certain voices. It's actually good education for mixers and arrangers just to learn about an orchestra. So, sorry, continue.
Yeah. You know, when I think about like a low mid, like a Rhodes or a keyboard sound, I'm considering a cello. That's like what I'm actually hearing, or that's what I'm feeling, and I'm trying to get that low mid resonance, that music, that harmonic that is in an orchestra in the cello section that creates richness and fills the gap between the bass and then that kind of mid-range music like upper piano or, you know, whatever's going on in the pop song. There's this low mid thing, and a lot of pop music is scooped out. So I'm constantly considering the cello. Like, why was it there? Well, how is that bridging the gap? And I do a lot of mix moves to maintain that fullness, because that to me is where you get that kind of belly sinking feel in like an emotional piece, or fullness in an up-tempo piece, just to have that. And maybe you have some sort of dynamic EQ or multiband compression kind of, you know, maintaining it, but pushing it against the vocals. So maybe you're side chaining into the vocals, so you're feeling that when it's necessary. But that creates fullness, and a lot of scooped, thin sounding records like forget about the cello. And I just want to say on this stream, don't forget about the cello.
Well, let's talk about that frequency range a little bit, because that's always really interesting. And I think we've talked about it a little before, but I think it's worth going into. It's that range that is above bass, and depending on the vocalist can touch some of the low notes in the vocal, but I think of as generally a little bit below the vocal. That classically, when you're recording, the classic move on recording live drums is like on an old Neve, I don't know, it's 1073 or 1064, one of those things has like a 360 cycles, and people will just basically turn that all the way down to make it like an acoustic drum, have that drop
the hollowness,
sound, the hollowness, which is like a very classic thing. But now samples have that built in, and sounds have that built in. But that range is also it's sort of the lowest frequency range that you can hear on a phone or on a small speaker. And there's a lot of, I find myself when I'm mixing stuff that I've been producing and trying to, I'm sort of like mixing as I produce, I'm often taking too much of that out. And I love hearing you talk about making sure that area really speaks, because I can get a mix that sounds great, and then I listen to it on the phone or on the laptop or something, and I'm not hearing any like chordal harmonic elements other than the vocals. Like the drums are kicking and the vocal sounds really great and clear, but there's like a sort of harmonic warmth that I'm missing in that low mid range. And you talk about cellos, you talk about Rhodes, it's the upper harmonics of bass guitar or bass synths. Look, it's a really underrated part of the mix spectrum, I guess.
When Serban is on, he's the best at this. Somehow he gets all those frequencies really wide. It's whatever's going on in his mysterious like multi-bus, multi-band compression thing that's just like so flat a lot of the time. When it's a great arrangement and he clearly cares, like this is the coolest shit that he's ever touched kind of thing. Like when he kind of how Silk Sonic sounds to me. Chromeo's record that he mixed from a bunch of years back was really exciting.
I didn't realize he mixed Chromeo stuff. I love the way that stuff sounds.
I don't remember the name of the album. Probably their last album. It sounded crazy. Found out Serban mixing and was like, damn, that's Serban at his finest. Like it's definitely still heavily compressed and doing that thing, but the low mids are there and they're full and they're wide and they're glowing and they're emotive. Like a lot of his mixes, probably based on arrangement and having too many synths in there and him going like, what am I going to do with this? Just like add more compression, whatever. Sounds like thin and sucked out in that area.
Because you got to mostly get things out of the way. When arrangements are too dense and not right as a mixer, it's a lot of, we talk about this, a lot of filtering, a lot of just getting things out of the way.
Yeah. So to be honest, to me, like he's the best at that when he's on. When he's not on, there's almost none of it. And it annoys me as a fan of his mixing. And for me, I tend to mix that stuff, Tony too, a bit more organically, where we leave that in. I kind of learned that from Jeff Basker. Jeff Basker refers to that as like the mystery in the record, where if you get too clean, it's too clean. Like leave some mystery and let some of that like rumble happen down there. I think in a straight pop record, you don't want too much of that mystery. And then all the way to like Lana Del Rey, you're going to probably leave more of that in it, right? Like there's going to be a varied spectrum of how much of this. But that's how you can imagine. You can hear a Lana Del Rey record, or My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy has a lot of low mids.
Mike Dean, a lot of Mike Dean mixes are very like that.
And well, Manny mixed My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, but it's kind of just the Basker approach to things. There's a lot of that 1 to 300, like someone is saying up there. When I think of cello, I think 200 hertz. It depends, obviously, give or take, depending on the key. But that's where it resonates and it feels good, and the fundamentals there, and it's full. But too much 200 takes away from the low end of the vocal, right? So there's that you're talking about between 2 and 250. There's a lot of vocal fundamental that sits there. You can kind of fuck that off in a kick. You won't lose too much punch in that if you want to. You can fuck around there, but you got to be really careful. This isn't just like a big dip move. And that's what I always say about Serban at his best. Gets that so full and contained, and at his worst, I'm like, where did it all go? He probably just compressed it all down with something, got rid of it. That's why you have to be really finessed. I love mixing with them pretty much forward until someone says it sounds too thick. That's probably more of if I had to pick a signature sound, I maintain a lot of low mids because that's the music. And no one ever complains about not being able to hear the chords on the phone. I get hired a lot for chord value music with drums that also hit, because that's something I spend a lot of time on. I might mix a vocal in 30 minutes and spend 3 hours getting the low mids and the drums to sit right and feel punchy, but also feel harmonically, sophisticated. Getting that 808 to hit, hit super low and subby how I like it, but also get enough of that overtone harmonically speaking with some sort of saturation that you can hear it on the phone. But I don't like 808s in that 1 to 150 range that where the kick is punching. It just sounds throaty to me, and it's just annoying. So I'm constantly sculpting that and then giving up and starting over again. Even if I think it's good, I mix the low end quite a few times in that area because I'm not sure which one I like the most yet. That's another way to think about it. It's not that one's right or wrong. It's which one do you like more? So fuck around with these big carved moves above and below this area, but don't be afraid of the cello.
Thanks for watching. Just a reminder, all of this content is free. There's no secret knowledge here. There's no Patreon. We don't read ads. We don't have sponsors. We're just trying to build a knowledge base. All that we ask in return is that you share it with somebody. Thanks so much.